here with two amazing women who have been introduced, so I won't do all of that again. But what we do want to get into is this idea about the power of stories, both to how they've shaped your lives and also how you think about how the stories that you tell and facilitate the telling of change other people's lives. Maybe just to set the scene and take a step back, oftentimes in this kind of work and the work that we do, we hear so many different kinds of stories. For example, I think a lot about all of the stories that were put out about Black fathers, for example, in the United States of America, and how Black fathers are absentee dads, they're not there. And that's a narrative that has been propagated. But when you actually come to find out and you look at the research, you find that Black fathers are so much more involved in their children's lives than anybody likes to admit. But at the same time, though, we're up against a narrative that has been put out there in film, on the news, in novels, and all of that stuff. It's so powerful, and yet the truth of it is equally powerful, but doesn't get the same billing. So I wanted to start off by asking you both, in the context of the work that you do, what are some of these negative stories that perhaps drive, that are very powerful, that you have encountered, and how have you thought about positioning yourself in your work to deal with that? Maybe Dorothy, let's start with you.
Okay, thank you so much. And I was thinking about that, and so I beg your pardon. I have a flu, so I'll be clearing my voice. But it's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for that question, so thoughtful, powerful. It takes me back to I was 20 years old. I was studying in Australia. I had the good fortune for my parents to send me to university. And I was in a taxi once, and I was in the back of the cab, and I was having a conversation with the Australian taxi driver. And we spoke and spoke and spoke, and he said to me, how long have you been in Australia for? I said, 6 months. He said, you learned English very quickly. I said, I'm sorry, what? He said, you learned English very, very quickly. I said, you think all this English I am speaking, I learned in 6 months here in Australia. He said, yes, you say you came from Africa. I said, Jesus. And that was the beginning of my problem. The misconstrued, thank you so much, this misunderstanding of Africa and Africans and who we are, and that we are not homogenous, and people have drawn conclusions about us, including that we learn English quickly in 6 months. I was like, there's a problem here. And so I think that is the root of when I was like, how can I help change the perspective of Africa? Because listen, I came from a good school. I lived in Nairobi. You guys are here. You know how we roll. Why does someone think that I don't know English? There is a disconnect. And that's when I was like, perhaps story is that connection. So that's the root for me. And then coming forth and saying, how can I help tell African stories? Number one, to Africans themselves, because if they don't appreciate who they are, because they have received a lot of data that perhaps is not accurate, and then how can we take African stories to the world, which is where I find myself in the job that I do.
So is this man in a taxi cab who pushed you into a certain
because
frame?
of the man in the taxi, I am now a storyteller and filmmaker. I actually will tell you, yes, it really shocked me because I was there studying law.
Yeah.
You have to understand. But I was like, did this man really just think that I learned all this English in 6 months?
Yeah.
Genuinely, he thought as much because of what he thinks about us in Africa.
Right.
So who is going to change that narrative if it's not going to be me, if it's not going to be you? It certainly is not going to be him.
Right,
So.
That's very true. That's very true. Now, Fernanda, I know that you had a similar process, I think, in coming to both the work that you do, the writing that you do, but also publishing, controlling platforms that allow people from certain places that maybe don't tell stories to be able to tell those stories. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. First of all, I would like to say that I'm really grateful to be here. It's my first time here in Kenya, so profoundly moved by this journey to get here because I crossed the Atlantic like my Afro-descent people did in many time ago. So it's very, very meaningful for me. And to be alongside with Dorothy and Uzo, that I admire the most. And Dorothy is a partner, and Joe also, in this fellowship program, this journey where we are learning from each other and really trying to see the world from a new perspective. And this is very important for my journey because I was always this girl and kid that loved to tell stories, to have conversations. I like people. So that's the reason that I start studying journalism, and then I start this process of being in a lot of platforms working and making interviews like the President Lula and Alice Walker, Conceição Evaristo, that is a great writer in Brazil. And in the moment of this process, I began to wonder my role as a Black woman because going through these spaces of power, I always look for through these spaces, and I see that my people, my Black people, were not there ruling these spaces. We were only invited to give speeches or to talk about poverty, which is a real, a huge problem in Brazil, or about samba, or about carnival. I wrote about that, so I can say that I can be the person that is cheering for carnival and also being very critical about this perspective that we are only this body of dance and not a body of thinking, and especially for Black women. So then I met my husband and the father of my Francisco, this beautiful boy that I'm always talking about him, you know. And, and one day we were very in love, you know, like those are, and we were talking, and I towards to him and say, "You already have publishing houses, okay? So why don't we do this together? Give me a chance." And he said, "Okay, I can do that for you." And I became the CEO of Figura de Linguagem, which is a small, really tiny, small publishing house. But the thing about Figura de Linguagem is that we start with this affirmative action, like we're Black people that is very aware of the problems of Brazil, so we are focused on marginalized voices, but we have affirmative action. So we also release Shakespeare, you know. You have 5 books of marginalized voices, and then one from a privileged. Adam Kirsch, which is a super important writer, and that is not Black. And we felt that it led to a tension, like, and at one point, it's an example, a colleague of mine from another company told me, "You can't do that. You're going to steal my job. You can publish white people. You can edit that because you're going to make a good job with the Black and the white. So what can we do? It's not right."
Wow.
It's one of the examples. I can tell you another one that I really like, that I told Uzo that male editors always saying, my husband keeps saying, "Oh, she's the CEO. She's the one that decides if the book is going to be released or not." And they say, "No, but it's easier to talk to you, you know? I know that she's a CEO, but I want to talk to you. Like, you're going to solve things, not her. We start this process, and we got very successful. It doesn't mean that we're rich, but that our work have this profound impact on the way they have to behave after we start to enter the room, like the tension. And I became this person that create projects to companies to make the book field more diverse. So reading clubs or trying to bring diversity. It led me to flip the literary festival of Parity, that is the largest in Brazil, and then I thank to the Van Leer Foundation Fellowship Program. So it's a little bit about my history as a curator.
Now you're here. So I want to pick up on something that you said and maybe flip it to Dorothy, because you talked about changing the way that people behave through story. And so let's maybe take a step into story, because you're an editor. You look at books, and you need to think about what story is going to move. And Dorothy, you probably see thousands upon thousands of people coming to you, people like me who come to you and say, "Look, I got a movie. What's good?" You know. And so I want you to talk a little bit about, from each of your experiences, two things. One is, what do you think moves, like makes a story move, is the first part. And the second is, what is, in your own experience, allows you the ability to see that? So Dorothy, maybe let's start with you, and then...
Whoa. It's like, this guy. It's like, you should have told us. I know. It's like, you just don't show up here. You're going to earn your keep. So I'll tell you, just from a story writing perspective, or when I look at the many pitches and proposals that come to my desk, or even what I see on TV, I always find that if people can see themselves in the story, that relatability, and I know you tell your students this all the time, sometimes people can have a very personal experience that is a little bit exclusive to them, and so people won't relate to that. So that is not going to be a blockbuster anytime soon. But at the same time, you can have an experience that thematically, it resonates with people in different ways. So I always say that and that's why I liked your question, what is the emotional question you're asking and answering here? Because that's what is going to touch people. It's not going to be the nice stuff you've written in the brochure. So I do feel that, for me, if in a story people can see and they can relate to themselves, then you have created that connection. And that plays out for characters as well. And I speak this in movie speak and TV speak because that's where I work.
Yeah.
But it is said when a show starts, immediately people's brains start calculating, who can I relate to in this particular movie? It doesn't have to be the main character. It can be somebody else. And once I relate to that person, because they're going through something I have gone through or I have seen someone else go through, then I stay connected and I stay watching.
Right.
So that's something that I would say is super important, is that connection, creating that connection, your story and your audience.
So it's about people in that sense. It's about how do we build people. And Fernanda, do you find that? I mean, you work with books mostly, so do you find it's the same, or how does it differ in that sense?
I would like to read a poem, can I? It's a form of connection. I love to talk about this book industry, but it's good to be just a poet too, okay, right?
Let's do that.
I'll try to reach your emotion into make this moment.
Real quick, do we in Portuguese or do we need translation?
I did something very wrong that I translate myself, my poem. It's not something that my colleagues, translators like, and you're not going to say this for them, okay? It's our secret now, okay. But it's just for the emergency, right? And So I need to know someone to translate my poems, right?
So I think we'll need that translation from English to Portuguese, and maybe not back then. All right.
But this is a body of work that I'm doing that it's related to the fellowship program, trying to emphasize this side of me and what I do, my experience as a caregiver. So I'm going to release this book. It's going to be launched in March. So it's baby. Baby loves to face the unknown. Umami, the taste of a hard-boiled egg, the bubbles that rise, transparent in the steam of water, and disappear. The motorcycle honking in the writing of a rocket. The truck carrying cans far away. The dance the chicken rehearses. Someone we do not yet know waves and smiles. The baby loves to face the unknown. One day, we were like this too.
Thank you. I'm going to talk to that. All right, so now watch what I'm going to do. Dorothy, what are your thoughts on that?
When you were reading, because of how my mind works, I was literally visualizing everything. The honking, the bubbles, the waving. I visually saw everything in my head. So I don't have like a comment on, I mean, it's a beautiful poem, but I found that I got lost wherever that place is, the street strangers waving at you, the bubbles, the sounds, I could viscerally, I saw it in my head. That's the reaction that I can, but I'm also a visual person, so I'm not saying that's everybody's experience, but this transported me somewhere that I have never been before. I've never met your son, but the last thought I had was my daughter Talo. That's the last thought I had when you were finishing the poem. And you really are very good. I cannot believe that I'm answering this. Like, I was transported and it ended with my daughter. Francisco I've never met, I've heard about, but ended with my daughter. But then I'm sitting here in this room of wonderful innovators. What can do that except story? Yeah, that's my initial reaction, apart from saying it's a great poem, because I've had so many of her poems.
Right.
But for now, it physically transported me somewhere in Brazil, brought me to Netherlands where my daughter is, and then back to Nairobi.
Let's talk a little bit about your kids,
Yeah.
because I think we're all parents up on this stage, some of us with kids who are older than others. But when you think about your kids, I think about my sort of being a child, and where I think story came into my life was with my father, who would always sit us down at bedtime, and he would tell these Nigerian folk tales. So, the tale of the tortoise and the tale of, the goat, all of these ones. And that's where my fascination with story grew. But I know both of you have thought a lot about whether or not our kids have access to stories that really tell them who they are. So when you think about your daughter, or when you think about Francisco, how do you think about making sure that they get the stories that help to shape them, and that other folks who are not your kids, but who are in that space, also get those stories?
I think I have two daughters. One is neurotypical, one's neurodivergent. She's 7 and she just started speaking about 8 months ago. So you can imagine that journey for us, right? The silence with her and trying to communicate, and the frustration and the journey and the learning. But I remember before she was born, I was on bed rest for 15 weeks. And so I wrote some books with black girls in them, and these are the stories because I wanted my daughter to see herself, because I couldn't find non-educational books that were telling stories about young girls. And fast forward to now, I realized that I didn't even have the full picture. So there are certain ways that she wants stories told to her. So she's not going to sit and read a book with you, but she can go to the corner and you can read a story and she will remember, she will hear. Because if you stop, she will stop and look at you and indicate, why aren't you continuing, and so on and so forth. I don't know why I'm sharing that, but that's been my journey parenting these two very different girls. But still, ultimately, at the end of the day, what my daughter Talo has taught me is how to listen. Because that is part of storytelling. To be a storyteller, you have to listen. I did a lot of talking before, but now I listen more, because when you have a child who cannot verbalize their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, you have to be able to know what that cry is saying. Are they hungry? Are they sick? Are they tired? Are they bored? Do they want something? And that is something that it has been one of the greatest gifts for me, is I was never someone who was good with new ones. So things would just pass me. But now I'm able to sit in a table and I can see this one is feeling this way, this person is feeling that way. I'm more sensitive to creatives because of her.
Because of
yeah,
that.
so that's been my journey.
So
with
that
her.
having kids has actually slowed you down a bit, is what you would say, and made you
Completely.
see more detail in the
Yes.
world.
Yes.
And
Oh, that is so beautiful. Yes, I'm going to write that down. Yes, but it slowed me down, and now I catch the detail, I catch the nuance. I'm not in a rush anymore. I used to find myself, I was in a rush, and I even tried. I tried and how can I juggle a career and be a mom and so on and so forth. And it proved to be very, very difficult. But in slowing down, then I've come to learn a lot more.
And Fernanda, I want to. Do you have a similar experience with Francisco, or how do you think about story and the story you tell now that you have a child?
No, it's it's really true that we change a lot. Even though I was this person that in my career I always have this, I was attached to activism, and I thought about the importance of having models to Francisco. But I came from a community that is really is really, I don't want to be misunderstood, but sometimes when you have to go through barriers and go through some difficulties, you start to think that the minimum, it's a lot. And especially for children, you keep thinking that, oh, you have food, you have a bed, or you're safe, that's okay. You don't need nothing. You don't need anything besides that. So something that we are building, it's like create a new cycle when we can imagine a better world for Francisco with not the minimum or the basics, but with what we think is something that everyone should have. So it's kind of difficult because sometimes our families don't see their heritage with us because we're changing their style of keeping the house or the territory where we live. So for me and for my husband, because we're trying really to co-parent, like sharing the responsibilities and making the more equal as possible. we always thinking about how our work is related to heritage. For example, I'm always working with this archive of enslavement and about the carnival in the city I was born, Porto Alegre. So I'm very close to that, to the memory. But at the same time, I'm a trader because I'm always trying to change some thoughts that they think they have about what is to be in the rights of a child. So it's something that it's really controversial for me because I feel that I'm changing things that I need to change, but they don't think that it's totally right.
Right. Dorothy, I wanna ask you about that because I think in some ways storytellers are always traders, right? You're always trying to push a world that isn't, that might make people uncomfortable in a certain way. And I'm wondering how you think about that.
I actually think that it is a necessary thing to do. If you comfort as a writer, as a creative, that's a red flag for you. Yeah. If you're like, oh, I'm just sitting, I'm chilling, and I'm just producing sausage factory kind of thing, you need to maybe accept that you're in it for the cash.
Right.
And you're right to do that. But if you really want to be a storyteller and a change maker, then you have to exist in that place of discomfort.
Yeah.
You have to be able to challenge. Even Africa is about aid. Let's just give them aid. And they have marasmus and kwashako and they're poor. Have you seen the big cars on the streets?
Yeah.
And then there's corruption we have to contend with, but also the country is beautiful. And. So there are uncomfortable stories that have to be told. My husband is a writer and he writes on masculinity intersecting with grief. Do you know when he started writing about grief, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, you really are going to immerse yourself in grief and death and this? And it's like, yeah, someone has to. Because the only way we prepare how to die, or we prepare to die, is by how we live. And someone has to write that story. So I think that it is important for us to avoid being comfortable. To always, there's somebody you're disappointing at some point. There's
Right.
someone you're pissing off.
Right.
And that's okay.
And
If
that's
you find
okay.
that's something that you're doing, then you're on the right path.
Thank you, Dorothy. And Fernanda?
I would like to talk a little bit about failures and mistakes. They are part of the process, because sometimes I look at your faces and you're like, oh, I'm carrying all the burden of the world or of my community. Activism is really serious and you should care about your mental health too. I know that it's hard. You have the responsibility, you have commitment, but you need to think about you and your families too, and take a time to breathe, to look at you in the mirror and say, I'm proud of me, I'm doing a great job, and I have the right of getting some fun sometimes, okay? Because it's a right, okay, even for activists, because we need you. What you're doing is special. And sometimes these mistakes are in the other side, the side of the ones that should recognize who is doing the job. So if you're not receiving right now the recognition that you deserve, don't feel that it's forever, because it's also a strategy to make you feel weak and give up. And they're very good at it. So don't give up, keep working, and I can say for me and for the Van Leer team and the other partners that everyone is super proud of you. So thank you so much for listening to, and thank you, Dorothy and Uzos. I love it.
No more words. Thank you. Thank you to both of you, and thank you to all of you for sharing with us and for listening to us today. So thank you.